Okay, well, we were born and raised in Lorain, Ohio. I was born in 1925. My mother's father came from Slovakia when he was 15 years old, probably to avoid the draft in the war over there, Austria-Hungary. My father's father did exactly the same thing, came over when he was 15 for the same reason. My mother's parents settled in Star Junction, Pennsylvania, and my grandfather worked in the coal mines, and he was severely injured in a cave-in. Of course, he got no compensation, but luckily he had trained as a shoemaker when he was in Europe, in the old country, and so he had something to fall back on. When his two older sons started working in a coal mine, decided it's time to get out of there, and they moved from Star Junction, Pennsylvania to Lorain, Ohio, because there was like a settlement of Slovaks in Lorain, and my other grandfather had a similar experience. I mean, he came over to Baltimore. He had learned to trade as a butcher when he was a teenager, so he had that trade to fall back on. His father, he married and had one son in Baltimore. His father died back in Europe, so his mother asked him to come back to help settle the estate. So he went back there, and he had one son he took with him. They were back there for like 5 or 6 years, and my father was born there at the same time, even though my grandfather was an American citizen. My father was born in Malashov, the Czech Republic now. That's the name of the town. It's near a place called Kutná Hora. They came back when my father was probably 2 or 3 years old. The only thing my father remembered from there was that there was a stream in the backyard of the house that they lived in. I don't know if I'm getting off the story here. Is this what you want to hear?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Anyhow, they came back, and then my father's father and their family, they moved to Lorain because there were a lot of Czechs there. And they moved into the two grandfathers moved into one block apart in Lorain, Ohio. So the families grew up there. My father met my mother because they lived in the same block. The two businesses were, my one grandfather had a butcher shop in one corner, and the other grandfather had a shoemaker shop on the opposite corner. So, and we all lived in the same neighborhood. Wow. So that was interesting with all the cousins and uncles and aunts and everybody. There was a lot of, now, so I grew up going to school in this, not South Lorain, but the southern part. There are two different things. Went to Garfield School through the 5th grade. Actually, my father became an automobile mechanic, and he used to fix cars. And during the Depression, sometimes people couldn't pay for their repairs, and so to pay for the repair, a fellow owned a house. We would go live in the house to pay for the repair on the truck or the car. So we did move around, but it was in the same neighborhood. So I did go to Garfield School, 1st and 2nd grade. 3rd grade, I went to a school called, we moved in a different district, moved to Garden, went to Garden School. I had a terrific teacher there. She was a farm girl, and she was wonderful. I remember her vividly, because we put on plays. This is a 3rd grade, right? Okay. And we had costumes made out of crepe paper with different color skirts and all that stuff. So she was her folks had a dairy farm. We would go out to the dairy farm, see them milk the cows and stuff like that. So she was a great teacher. Then I moved back, and back in my dad fixed somebody else's car, truck, and so we moved back into the other neighborhood. I went back to Garfield School for the 4th and 5th grade. Then we moved to the east side of Lorraine. My dad bought a building there, started his own garage business, and I lived there until went to Fairholme School for 6th grade, Longfellow School for junior high for 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then to Lorraine High for 9th, 10th, and or 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Junior high was really good, had great teachers. High school, I was small in stature, so it was a little bit tough. In the wintertime, I had to walk across the East Erie Avenue Bridge over Black River. It was pretty cold there. So on the corner there was a building called the Broadway Building, and they had a hallway going through it. So I could walk over the bridge, go in the hallway, get warmed up, and then walk to. So it was about, I guess, a little less than a mile to walk to the high school.
So you literally had to walk to the high school in the snow?
Yeah, over the bridge, yeah. And my mother made me a fur hood, so I had this fur hood I put on. Yeah. Well, of course, everybody else had to do that too, you know.
Yeah. You always hear stories of older people saying how they used to have to walk to school in the snow back and forth, and then like how easy my generation and the generation now has it, where we get carpooled.
And then back to junior high, we lived a little over a mile from the junior high, and in the wintertime, if you lived over a mile, you could carry your lunch. You didn't have to, because we went home for lunch. So in the wintertime, and there was a little gal, a black gal lived around the corner from us, so she and I would walk back and forth, and especially each day, home for lunch, walk a mile home for lunch, a mile back. In the summer, in a warmer weather, cold weather, we could both carry our lunch to school. Of course, when I was in high school, World War II started. I could maybe mention one more thing. I took French in high school. Well, I should say French took me. I wasn't a very good student. I was a good shop student. Yeah. Went to shop and got all A's in shop, but in French, I was failing French. I had a very sympathetic teacher, so she had me come in after school, and she tutored me till I could pass French. So Miss Hartley was a great French teacher. Remember that. Of course, then the war started. The World War II started, and
what year?
I graduated in January 1943. Okay. The war had already started.
So, what was it like? Because you were 17, 18 when the war originally started with the invasion of Czechoslovakia and Poland in 39 and 37. So what was it? What was the atmosphere like when that stuff was going on?
Of course, they even entered. Well, they had. I mean, we were in Ohio, but they still had blackouts. At night, they would have. You were supposed to pull all your shades so no light would show through. And of course, in case of, I guess, air attack. Of course, it never happened, but we still had that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I remember I remember a little bit about the rationing of food, especially meat and dairy products that they would ration. And my mother had coupon books where you could get so much meat, and you had to turn it into the grocery store to get your food and that. So I do remember that. But then my two friends and I, after we graduated, we knew that the day we turned 18, we were going to get drafted in the Army. And we didn't want to go in the Army. Yeah. And so the three of us went down to enlist like in January. We graduated in January, well, probably February, we went down to enlist. And enlisted in the Navy. Mm-hmm. And two of us later on passed the physical, and my other friend had flat feet, so they rejected him for the Navy. So the two of us went in the Navy, and we were supposed to both go to the same place. Well, I went to Great Lakes, and he went to New York. That ended. I didn't see him until the war was over. Okay.
Wow.
Anyway.
What was do you have any siblings? One
sister.
Is she younger?
2 years younger, yeah.
Okay. what was your like immediate family's reaction that you were like, I'm just going to enlist before I get drafted?
Yeah. They thought it was okay.
Okay.
Yeah. My sister and I had we still have a good relationship. She lives in Ravenna, Ohio, or Akron, Ohio now, and we still get together. She's 2 years younger than I am, but she's probably more active than I am. I still can get around, but I'm starting to get a little bit wobbly when I walk. But I can't remember. Okay, so enlist in the Navy, have boot training at Great Lakes, Illinois. One interesting, that was good. I had been a gymnast when I was younger. My one uncle taught gymnastics for what they call the Suckles, which is the Slovak gymnastics group. So I was I knew how to do, handstands and flips and things like that. So, when I got in boot camp, I was in good enough shape to do all the marching and that sort of. One incident is interesting to tell about that. We were marching one day and it was raining, and we had like rubbers on our boots, and I stepped on a heel, and the guy in front of me, we were marching in the company, and pulled his shoe off in the rain, and he turned around and hit me right smack in the stomach. And the chief petty officer saw that, and he said, "Oh, you two guys want to fight, huh?" Okay, so he marches all of us into some gym and puts the gloves on this other kid and me. And I was a little bit smaller, but he was fat and slow. So this is my first, and well, luckily for me, my one uncle had fought in the Golden Gloves, so he taught me a few things about boxing. So anyway, I was able to beat this kid, okay? And of course, I became like a hero in the company. I remember that.
What were your thoughts when you're traveling from Ohio to Great Lakes in the Chicago area? Like, did you have any, like what was going on in your mind as you're preparing to like go into basic, and what was the atmosphere like when you first arrived on that first day of training, if you can recall?
The marching thing and all that wasn't new to me because I'd been in the Suckles, this a Slovak gymnastic group, and we learned how to drill and march. And in fact, one time they had a big thing at the Cleveland, well, it wasn't at Cleveland Stadium then, it was, I think, League Park was a stadium there, and they had these suckle groups from all over Pennsylvania and northern Ohio, and we would practice, these drills. We had like a 3-foot stick that we used, I think it came over from the training in Europe where they used to train with rifles and that, but we had just sticks, and we'd do these drills where we'd put them over our head and over our side, and there'd be 100 of us out there in this, all doing the same drills, and to some kind of music. I remember that, doing that one time. I don't know, I'm getting off the track now.
No, this is totally fine. We're talking about basic training, and
so I did have some experience with marching and drilling and stuff like that from this Suckle group that we call it. It's SOKOL, is the way it's spelled. So then in boot camp, they give you tests. I think boot camp is like about 3 months long. And you go through a series of tests, and they decide, where to send you. When boot camp was over, then I went to. My father had, I told you, a repair garage, and so I had worked in the garage on Saturdays and weekends and stuff like summers. So I had some experience with, car engines and repairs and that. So anyway, I went to the University of Illinois, and they had a small engine repair facility.
This is while in training still?
At the end, yeah, this is after boot camp. Then you get sent to 3 months of school in internal combustion engines. There was Gray Marine diesels, which had unit injectors. There was Hall Scotts, which had different kind of injectors, and there were some gasoline. I can't remember the gasoline ones now. So we had 3 months of training on that, and then I got sent to San Diego to landing craft school. And in the morning, we would, they had these 36-foot landing craft wooden boats, and they had 50-foot metal boats, tank lighters. The 36-footers had a single engine in them, gasoline, and the tank lighters, the 50-footers, had 2 Gray Marine diesels in them. And we would go out around Coronado. Yeah, Coronado. So we'd go around Coronado Pass, and there's a good beach there. So we would learn to run the landing craft up on a beach and back them off. Sometimes we'd pick up some troops and do that too. But then the trick of it was to get it back off the beach. Now the 36-footers, they had single engine, and there'd be a surf too, you know. So you had to watch the surf when you were going to back them out. And many times the single engine one would get you'd get turned sideways on a beach. Well, then they had another boat out there that they'd come in and they'd throw you a line, you tie it on, and they'd tow you off. Now the 50-footers, the tank lighters, they had 2 engines, and so you could, by controlling the engines, you could keep it perpendicular to the beach and back off, and then make another run on. So that's how we learned how to run those things. So I did that I was there for like another 3 months. So then I got assigned to a ship, and I was lucky. I got assigned to a slow boat. It called the USS Aldita, AK-127, and we had 6 landing craft on it. 4 36-footers and 2 50-footers. I got on a ship at a place called, it was up the California coast, called Port Hueneme. And we loaded troops there. The ship's holds, and this was a Liberty ship, what do you want to call one? It had 5 holds on it, and in the holds they had built double-decker bunks. They were like 8 high, and what they were was a pipe frame with a canvas lashing in it. Of course, and they were, like I said, 8 high. I think it was 8 high, and the troops were that's where they stayed, and on the deck they had 4 long latrines, which were just big double troughs, you know, with seawater running through them. So that was the places where the troops had to use their restroom facilities, and they could only have saltwater showers too. They didn't have freshwater showers. We had freshwater showers for the ship's crew, and we had regular heads, you know, or bathrooms that we could go to.
What was the relationship like with the soldiers that were there?
It was, I think, usually it was okay, but they spent most of their day standing in chow lines because they only got fed twice a day. There's 1,000 of them on there, you know, so they spent most of their day standing in line to get their next meal, and they had, you know, very little to do. They could lay around on the deck, and that was about all they could do. We had one tragedy on it because they just had fans. There was no air conditioning in the holds where they had fans, and they would open up some of the deck on top. And one of the troops that we had was he fell through the hole in the deck, and on the way he hit his head. It killed him on the way down. And we were only about, this was after we had left, and we were only about a day or two from our port. We were going to go in a place called Espiritu Santos in the, I can't remember the name of the group of islands now. Anyway, so instead of, burying him at sea, they put him on a stretcher, and they stood him in the cooler in the till we got. And I'll get back to me. I got assigned to the engine room. Now, this engine on the ship was a 2-story, 3-cylinder steam engine.
Was your rank? Was your rate like an engineman or?
Well, I was a motor machinist mate,
Okay.
which is small engines. But when the ship is underway, I was assigned to what they call the black gang, or the crew that worked in the engine room. Okay, our engine, and I was assigned to be what they called an oiler, because this engine had to be oiled by hand with an oil can, even though it was 3-cylinder, what they called triple expansion. It had about a 2-foot diameter cylinder, about a 4-foot, and about a 6-foot. And it's triple expansion, so the steam went in the small one, went into the middle one, and then went into the big one. And the engine would go like, about like this. Just up and down slowly like this, maybe a little over a second per revolution when it was, and then the bearings on this, the connecting rods were like a foot in diameter, and they were about 7 feet tall. So I mean, it was a big, and the cranks on the crankshaft were, they were like 2 foot and sweep like that, and the bearings were like foot in diameter, big. And we had they had oil cups on them. So as the engine is going, because you have this oil can, and you go in and you oil it, leave it squirt like that, and you did that twice an hour. You had to go around the engine twice an hour, and you're on a shift. Your watch is 4 hours, so you'd have to do it about 8 times. There's some the little valves up there that shift the way the steam goes. There's small oil cups on them, and they move about maybe a foot like this. They go like this, and as they come down, you got to take the oil can and go in there and oil them. And you take an oil can and you cut the spout off about 2 inches long. So. My first experience with a chief petty officer who'd been in the Navy for probably 15 years. An old salt, right? So I'm trying to oil these things, and I get the spout of the can caught in the cup, and I can't get it out. I take my hand away, and it comes out. It smashes the oil can. So I have to go get another oil can, cut the spout off, do the same thing a second time. So this time I'm thinking, well, I leave the spout long, right? And I stand back like this, and I'm aiming to squirt the oil in there. Well, it misses half the time, and this chief petty officer sees me doing this, and he says, Mason, I showed you how to do that. Now, get the can, cut the spot off, and do it like I showed you. Well, I did it again, and I smashed it again, And I said, I'm not doing that, And I'm feeling seasick anyway. This is our first trip out. And when he sees me doing that with that long span again, he says, Mason, get your ass out of here. He literally kicked me in the ass and chases me out of the engine room. I get put on report for the captain, insubordination. Well, luckily for me, the captain is a nice guy.
Was that your first time actually underway in the ocean?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah, and
the Pacific side, right?
Yeah.
So
we're in rough weather, and the ship is heaving, and the engine's throwing oil. And when it does this, it's a steam engine. When it does this, the ship's screw comes out of the water. So they gotta slow the engine down, and they gotta speed it up. I mean, it's a mess. It's a tough situation. situation. Well, he says, okay, for your punishment, you get 3 months watch in the forward crow's nest, which is up on top of the forward mast, 30 feet above the ship, right? There's 2 of us up there at night, from 12 to 4 in the morning. And during the day, you work in the kitchen, in the mess hall, washing pots and pans. Okay, which was one of the better things that happened to me. I get to know all the cooks, right?
Yeah.
So I do this for 3 months, right? And of course, by that time, I become acclimated to the rough weather and all that stuff, and that works out good. So I get finished with that. I go back in the engine room. I'm in there for a couple of days, and the same chief petty officer assigns me to 3 more months in the mess hall washing pots and pans. But that's easy then, because I can sleep all night, right? But I get to know all the cooks, I get good food and all that stuff. Well, then I finally learned how to oil this engine, and I'm doing that. And they have another thing on the ship called the Evaporator. It makes evaporates seawater to make fresh water, and it's I guess it's a kind of a tricky thing. And they try to get guys to do this. You got to regulate the temperature and the amount of steam going in and that. And they kept going through guys. So finally they said, Mason, would you like to try this? Sure. I get out of the engine room. Well, make a long story short, I learned to do this, and that's good too, because when you're underway, then you got 4 guys doing this, so you work for 3 hours, and then you get 12 hours off instead of just 8 hours. So it's a good thing, and so we're doing this, and then and I'm on. Of course, I'm on. When we get into, well, I could go back a little bit. And I lost my, or I don't have my diary here, so the first guys, the troops, we take them to Espiritu Santos, and we unload them, and we pick up some other troops, and we take them up to an island called Bougainville, Solomons. They are Seabees, and we're taking them up to Bougainville, which still has some Japanese on it. They didn't clear that island, but they're to build an air force so they could land Air Force and get closer to Japan. So we unload them in our boats, because there's no docks there. So we have to unload the ship. The guys climb down these rope nets on the side of the ship to get it. Then we have the landing boats alongside, and then we take them on the beach. There's no fire, enemy fire there. They're pretty far away, so it's we just have to take them in, and they take their stuff off their bulldozers and trailers and jeeps and their equipment to build the airstrip on Bougainville. At that time, though, there was one dead Japanese body that was floating by, and they towed him away. I don't know. I really don't know what they did with him. Let's see if what else I can remember.
So you drop off the CBs, they're going to create a landing strip so that we can get closer and closer, because Japan has taken over all these islands. And
yeah, and they're getting closer and closer to Japan.
And this is our effort of getting closer so we can start liberating some of these locations.
To get the airplane so that they can actually bomb the mainland of Japan. I don't know if they could bomb them from Bougainville, if that's close enough or not. But then they went up to, we would go back and Geez,
Did you have to work on any of the landing craft, like the original thing that you actually worked on?
Oh yeah, but yeah. I kept the engines running on the landing craft. Yeah, that was my job. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't just me. We had other guys too that did that, and you have to clean the injectors on them or change them, keep the engine running, change the filters. One time, I'm not keeping the time frames exactly the same, but another incident we had, we were in the Fiji Islands. We had to go around on the backside. I think Suva was the main port, and we had to go around on the backside to another port and pick up some New Zealand troops and some native troops. And there was a pier there you could dock to, but so anyway, we pulled in there and we load them up. But to get away from the dock, they didn't have any. We were a big ship, so they usually had some kind of a tug to pull us away. Well, they didn't have anything there, so they put the two big 50-foot landing craft over the side, and we put lines on the ship, and we were perpendicular to them, and we were pulling the ship away from so it could get away from the dock, so it could go without rubbing the dock. Well, while we're doing this, the ship starts forward, and I'm in the back landing craft. Well, we can't. There's so much tension on the line, we can't get it loose. So we swing around, and the ship's propeller. We swing right over the ship's propeller, and it cuts a hole in the bottom of our boat, right in the engine compartment. So I go down there and see this water squirting in, and they finally take a knife and they cut the line, so we're free from the ship. And we're close to a shore there. So I'm trying to figure out how to keep this water from coming in there. So I take off my clothes and I poke them in. It's a slit about an inch or so, inch and a half wide. So I'm poking my clothes in here to keep the water in from coming in. And they run the boat then up on the beach. So it stops. And then we had we had repairmen come off the ship there, and they got down there and they welded a patch on the boat so that we could get back out and put it on. So that was a little bit exciting thing, Yeah. But the two of us we're standing there with our hands. The ship curves down like this, and the propeller is going around like this, and we're standing there trying to hold the boat off of the propeller. Like, it's a very vivid memory, as you can tell, right?
Yeah.
So, anyhow, we got over that.
Sounds quite scary.
It was an interesting time. Yeah. I can't remember. We were all over. One trip we took to, we picked up again another bunch of New Zealand troops that had been fighting, I think, on Guadalcanal, and we took them back to Auckland, New Zealand, I think the place was. And we thought, oh boy, this is going to be good. We got civilization, right? So. We get back to Auckland and we unload the troops, and half of the ship's crew gets to go on liberty. And unfortunately for me, I wasn't one of them. And so I'm supposed to get liberty the next day to get to see some civilization again. But the next day in the morning we leave, so we don't get any liberty there. We go back off on another trip. Oh, geez, I don't know any other interesting things I could tell you. We went to so many. Oh, I should tell you about we went to a place called Bora Bora in the Society Islands to pick up some troops that were there. We went there. We were empty to pick up the troops. These Army guys, they had been there for a couple of years. And so we loaded. We got to go ashore there, and it was just a real. The people were, let's say, beautiful South Sea Island natives. The island itself was what you call it was just really nice. So we got to go liberty there, and we loaded the next day. We had to load these Army guys up, and then because they'd been there for 2 years. Where some of them had fraternized with the natives, and they had some of them had young, babes in arms, right? So we load all these guys up and we haul them away. I don't remember where we took them now. We went back there again later on. I'm not sure how, back there again. But this time when we got there, they didn't let us get off on the main island for our liberty. They put us on this sand strip with a couple of beers and some ice cream. So here we are back in Bora Bora again, but we can't really get into the nice part of it. So then that was our second trip to Bora Bora. It was not very pleasant.
Did you ever encounter any kamikaze scares or any encounters with Japanese fleet while you were in the Pacific?
No, and the thing that was good about we traveled mostly by ourselves, and we always had a sub chaser escort with us that was ahead of us wherever we went. So we never had to worry about Japanese subs. I'm sorry that I don't have my diary here. The only period my kids were supposed to send it to me, and they sent me 3 months of 3 years. So that's all I got.
That's okay.
This was. I don't know if you want to look at this stuff or not. It's just like from. What was the date on this? I can't even remember. March and April. This is probably 1943. Yeah, it's probably 1943. That's all I have of it.
Were you ever worried that the Japanese would potentially do something to your vessel?
Bougainville, New Guinea, up around when we got up in the northern part there.
What was the general feeling on the ship? Because you mentioned how you never really encountered anything other than deploying those troops to the one island to set up the landing strip. That was probably one of the only encounters you had with Japanese soldiers.
Well, I went there. We made 3 trips to Bougainville with different troops and that. But we got there the second and third time. They had built temporary docks that we could just dock to, and the guys could just walk off the ship, and you could just unload into trucks and things like that. So it was much easier unloading. Then we didn't have to use the boats.
Yeah. Was everybody else? Was anybody on edge, or was it always?
Oh yeah! Anytime we took troops up to Bougainville, I mean they were still fighting. They never did clear the Japs off of there. In fact, I don't know if you knew, Bougainville. Just before we got there on our first trip, Yamamoto was killed.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that planned the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
The Americans had broken a Japanese code, and they found out that Yamamoto was going to come to Bougainville to inspire the troops there to get rid of that they were to try and chase the Americans off of the island. So they knew, they broke the code. They knew when he was coming. They sent, I think, 8 or 10 fighter planes from, Guadalcanal. And when his plane was coming into Bougainville, the fighter planes they timed it perfectly. They got there and they shot him down and they killed him. Of the 8 or 10 American fighters that went there, they lost one, and they shot down most of the Japanese escort planes also. I don't know. Did I tell you about the part where I went back to the States to train to be a pilot? Did I get into that at all?
No. Is that during the war?
Okay. after they had finished off Germany and they were planning the invasion of Japan, they were going to need more pilots, and they couldn't find enough young blood in the States to fill their slots for pilots. So they sent this thing out through the fleet, asking for guys with certain qualifications. Well, this is interesting because I told you that's when I was working in the evaporator room, and I had a night watch, so I was in my bunk, and my buddy that worked in the evaporator room with me come running down to my bunk and shakes me and wakes me up and said, "Hey, Mason, here's your ticket back to the States." I said, "What are you talking about?" So he shows me this paper that they put on a bulletin board where they want guys that could pass the physical and the written test to train to be pilots. They could go take the physical and the written test anyway. And if you passed it, you could go back to the States and train to be a pilot for the invasion of Japan. So we'll make a long story short. I could take the written test on the ship. They sent the thing to the ship, and lo and behold, I took the test and I passed it. So, but to take the physical, you had to go to a base or an island that had an air base on it, and the doctor there had to give you the physical. So we pull into a place. I see they have an air base. Well, I told you about this chief petty officer who still had it in for me. And we would come in there. He would give me some assignment on the landing craft to go off somewhere, And by the time I got back, the ship was ready to leave. I couldn't get my physical. Okay, once. Next time, I don't know, a month later, something like that, we're in another place, I can get the physical. He pulls the same thing. I go off, come back to the ship, I can't get the physical. We go off again. So I find, what the hell am I going to do? So I went to the ship's doctor and told him what was going on. So the next time we came into a place, the ship's doctor went through the executive officer to the captain, right? And I got to get off of the ship. Got my physical, passed it, and I don't know. A little while later, then my orders got sent to the ship that I was supposed to get off and come back to the States to train to be a pilot. So I got off at a place. I think I got off at a place. I think Weetalk or one of the islands there. Our ship stopped, and I got off. And I tried to get on they had planes that flew back, and I tried to get on a plane, but I'm a third-class petty officer, which is pretty small. And I kept getting bumped off the planes by commissioned officers. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for a place to get back to. I got on this tramp steamer, merchant ship. And so it takes me a while. But anyway, I finally get back to San Francisco, have my orders, go back. I get 30 days leave. I get back home. This is the first time I've been home almost 2 years, right? And after that, I go to for pre-flight training at Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania. And I start the pre-flight training. I'm in it for 2 weeks. They drop the bombs on Japan, atomic bombs. So they end that program. And so then, and what they did then, they assigned you a number, when you got to a certain number, then you could, I was young, right? And there were a lot of guys overseas that had been a lot longer, were older, so they would get to go back to the States, but they had to have people to replace them. And I'm saying I was still young, and that. So anyway, make a long story short, I got put on a troop ship, which I was very familiar with. Right, I went back out to San Francisco, got put on a troop ship, and as a passenger, which I knew how they treated passengers on troop ships. So first thing I did when I got on board, I went down in the hold there. They had these 10 high bunks. I got the top bunk. I found myself a bucket, and I had a lock, so I locked the bucket to the chain on my bunk, so I could wash my clothes and stuff like that. Anyway, so anyway, they took us over to Japan, and I got assigned to a minesweeper, the USS Phantom, it was called.
Before we talk about your experience on the Minesweeper, when you said you were given 30 days of leave, were you able to go back to Ohio?
This was before I went into pilot training. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were able to see your family briefly during the war.
Yeah.
And actually like go back home. And
yeah. The war in Europe was over, but it was still, the war in Japan was, it was still going on.
When you come home in the middle of a world war and you were just out to sea, like what was everyone's reactions and what were they feeling when you come home?
Like I was a big hero, I guess. Yeah. Of course, you're wearing a uniform, and you got some bars on it, So yeah, they treat you pretty good, and you get acquainted with your old girlfriend again, who's been writing to you, all this time.
Yeah. So it was a nice little break.
It was really, it was good. And my sister and I, we were very close anyway, and so that was, I was glad to see her again. We did a lot of stuff. And my sister and I, we danced. We like to dance, so we could do that.
All right. So you go back. Now you're in Japanese area.
Well, then I got assigned to this minesweeper, and during the war, the Air Force had dropped anti-shipping mines all up and down the China coast and between Japan and China to try to destroy the Japanese shipping. And so I got put on this minesweeper. To run the engines, because they had diesel engines in them. And we went down to Formosa, Taiwan now. And I think there were probably 8 or 10. 2 wooden ones, wooden hull, they're smaller. And then I was on about a 130-footer, the USS Phantom. So during the daytime, then we would go out. They had mapped the whole area out. I mean, so we knew where we were going. And the 2 wooden minesweepers would go first because these mines were magnetic too. And they're just like you see a picture of. They're like a round ball with things sticking out of them. And they were anchored. They had like a little 4-wheeled trolley with a cable reel on them. And they would slide them off of the back of the ship, and they had them set so that they would go down to the bottom, and then the reel would unwind until the mines were floating about 10 feet below the surface. Or something, I'm not sure, maybe 6 feet or whatever. So the wooden ones would go first, and they had their gear out to the side. There's like a float on it, and then down probably 12 or 15 feet, there was a cable, and then there was another cable coming off of the ship that had like a cutter on it. Sharp thing. So they drag it through. It would get the cable on the mine, would get in there and cut it, and the mine would pop up to the surface, and then they would explode those by rifle fire. And most of them would explode, but a few of them would just sink. They would, from the rifle holes in them. at first they used to be able to do that from our ship, but then the bullets would, and of course we had a line of minesweepers, the wooden one here, and then they staggered back. The minesweepers would be in the part that was cleared by the one in front of it. And when they first were trying to shoot those mines, the bullets would ricochet off, so they stopped that, and they would they had a small boat way in the back. We watched the mines float through there, and then the small boat way in the back would sink or float the mines that were cut. Believe it or not, the ship we cut over 200 mines.
Wow.
And there were a lot of other ships. And every time we cut a mine, we had a guy that would paint a hash mark on the stack of the ship, and he got it filled up, right?
Yeah.
So then for 5, he would paint one of them red. So that's how many mines we cut. Well, we were there for about 3 months. Another incident too, when we would come in at night, we'd get in just before dark so we could see what we're doing, and they would. We got the Mexicans when they were finished. This is the typical. They take all the garbage, they just dump it over the back of the ship into the water. There were a bunch of young kids on the shore, and they had long bamboo poles with a tin can tied on the end of it, and they would try to fish out food particles out of the water. We did this like the first couple of nights. And there were, I would say, 8 or 10 kids, young kids. So what we ended up doing then, at night when we finished eating, if we hadn't left on our tray, we would separate out the edible stuff into a pot that the cook kept. And then we were all done, these little kids would come up the gangway and he would give them a ladle of food.
Wow. It was better than wasting it.
And they were, and then one incident though, there was, I guess, 8 or 10 kids, something like that. And they were young, really young. And they kept pushing this one kid back to the back of the line. And they kept saying, "Why did you do that?" And they go, he Japanese. Now, I was a Japanese kid on Formosa, I don't know, but there was even discrimination amongst these little kids.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And, it's like, it's remarkable that you were able to cut, your crew, your command was able to cut over 200 mines. Like, I don't think people really recognize how dangerous mines are and the kind of damage that they can cause to vessels.
Yeah.
And
well, they probably, I'm sure they cut some before I got on it,
Yeah.
But we switched over from the single ones to the red ones, 5, yeah.
How was your command on the Minesweeper compared to your transport ship?
It was good. It actually, on the transport ship, except for the one guy, and I hopefully I didn't run into him too often, but it was good. Yeah, it was really good. In fact, after we finished there, we got all finished. We went to Shanghai, China, for 2 weeks for R&R. And Shanghai was, we got to go ashore there every other night, and we got to go to some nightclubs, got to do some dancing with the local, and then music and some beer and stuff like that. So that was one other incident too. The same thing at night, dumping the trash over the fantail at night. And the first night we dump it over, there's one boat comes up there with a Chinese guy in it. Dump it in my boat, right? The next night, there's a couple of boats there, and these guys are, with their oars, they're poking each other so they can get the favorite position to dump the trash into their boat.
Yeah.
And because they're so hard up for food, you know.
What was the climate like in China? You know, they have a civil war going on while they're in World War II. You know, they're fighting the Japanese, but they're also fighting themselves.
Yeah, well, I didn't get anything. I didn't have any knowledge of that.
Okay.
I didn't get into that.
So there was you didn't like recognize any like communist like propaganda or any like conflicts like that?
No. Like at this club where we would go and dance was an interesting thing. I can remember one of the girls that I danced with was from a Jewish girl from Germany. You know, they had escaped to Shanghai, which was, I don't know if they got out of the, you know, from one place as bad as another, but they survived the war.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever happened to her. Well, we got finished with Shanghai. We went to, we had, I don't know if I told you, we had, did I mention that thing about the one mine exploding when we brought it in?
No.
Okay. Well, we were bringing the mines in one time, or bringing the gear in after we were finished for the day. We almost had it, the gear wrapped up into the ship, and there was instead of cutting the mine off, it caught it and broke the cable. So there was a live mine in our cutting gear. So the fellow that was running the winch reversed it, and you know, to get it away from the ship, and the mine hit the float, and it exploded. And we were in the aft engine room, which was the ship. It didn't do really damage to the ship, but the explosion caused the ship to heave like that.
Yeah.
And so propelled a lot of the water. The ship, the engine revved up and all that. We shut the engine down. And we both got out of the engine room. And when you're doing that, they have all the watertight integrity on the ship, so they have all the hatches are closed in case you get a hole in the ship, which we didn't. But anyway, we got out of there in a hurry.
Yeah.
But luckily, it you know, just damaged the gear. So we were okay. Then when we left Shanghai going back.
So were you doing the mining operations near the coast of Shanghai, or was it both Shanghai and Taiwan?
In between.
Okay.
And north. We kept working our way north. Each day we'd go a little farther north, yeah.
Okay.
And there were other fleets, there were other groups doing the same thing. So we were one group of several, I think, doing that. So anyway, on our way back, we had like, I think, probably 8 Minesweepers going back to the States. We had the 2 wooden ones and the 6 bigger ones.
Do you go to mainland Japan before you head back to the States?
We did. We stopped there. And that's why I got off, and 2 of us got off. We were in, okay, what's the name? I mentioned the name of the town. I can't remember it now. It was all bombed down, and one of my friends and I went ashore, and this little Japanese kid came up to us, and he was probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 years old, something like that, and he gave us each an envelope, an envelope about like the size of a postcard. I still don't know what it says, but in it there were 3 feathers in the envelope. Each of us, he gave us each one of those. I've never figured out what the significance. I still have it at home. So we were only ashore for a couple hours, but we got to see that. Then we left there, headed back, and we stopped for refueling, and I think it was at Inuitak, but I'm not positive that was a place. Anyhow, when we got there, all this was after the war's over, and there's no fuel there. We can't get any fuel because almost everything is gone. Mm-hmm. So we have to keep on going, and these two small wooden boats don't have enough fuel to make it to Hawaii. So what we do when we're underway, we have enough fuel in our boats to make it in some extra. So what we did was transfer fuel from our boat to theirs while they put a hose over, and we pumped fuel over to them. Well, when we got finished doing that, our ship, instead of being on an even keel, is like this in the waters. It's not on an even keel. And of course, the other guy that was pumping the fuel, I guess his math wasn't very good. Anyhow, so the chief engineering officer asked me, would I like to try that job? And I says, well, do I have to stand watches if I do it? He said, no. I said, yes, I would like that job. So, and the tanks in the ship don't have, there's only the one in the engine we are using has a gauge on it. The rest of them, they have a tube goes up to the deck, and you take a tape measure with a plumb bob on it, and you put some chalk on the tape measure, and you go around and you watch the ship like this, and you let the tape down when the ship is on an even keel, pull back up. Well, the liquid in the tank then washes the chalk off the tape to the point where you know how much is in it. And then you go to your charts and you see tank number so-and-so has so many inches. It's got so many gallons of water or fuel oil or lubricating oil, whatever it is, in the tank. So then, after I measured all the tanks, then through the series of pumps on the ship, I could move fluid from one oil tank to another oil tank on the other side of the ship, or one water tank to another water tank, till I got the ship even, and I was able to do that. So I was a hero, okay, yeah. A minor hero.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we got back to San Francisco again. And they're going to take the ship around from San Francisco to the East Coast through the Panama Canal. And by this time, I have enough points to get discharged. So the engineering officer asked me would I stay on the ship to make the trip. And I says, well, thanks, but no thanks. He says, well, I understand. He says, sorry to see you go, but, you know. So then I got off the ship and got sent home and got discharged.
And that was the last of your service?
Yeah, so I had...
I
got to, of course, when we were in Formosa, I picked up a Japanese rifle and a sword. They had a whole pile of them there. We could just grab one. So took the train then back to Toledo, Ohio, and got discharged there. And hitchhiked from Toledo to Lorain, and carrying my rifle over my shoulder in my sea bag. And that was, luckily I had the GI Bill, right? So went to Kent State University on a GI Bill. Started that summer. I think I got home in about April. Started in June. And I went to Kent on the GI Bill. My sister went also to school there. Her roommate happened to be a nice girl from Cleveland, Ohio that I met. And we got married. And so that's the story.
That's great. Did you make any friendships along your journey through your military career?
I did.
Do you still, or had you remained connected with those individuals?
A couple of them. We had some reunions, a couple of reunions, and but 90% of them have died. So I'm one of the lucky survivors. Yeah. And then we had about 5 reunions, ship reunions, different parts like St. Louis and Memphis. I can't remember the other ones. But then it got to the irony of it is, the fellas that were the catalysts for the reunions that kept them going, they were actually 2 of my engine room buddies they lived in California. And the one died, and then the other one, he and his wife got killed in an automobile accident. And I wasn't active in actually setting it up, so they died out. But there weren't very many of us left anymore.
Yeah. Did you ever join any military organizations or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm in like the VFW and the American Legion. I'm not really active in it, though. I don't do much in it.
When you got out, what did you major in?
Okay, when I went to school, I majored in industrial arts. I became a high school teacher.
Okay.
My wife was an elementary teacher. She just really taught full-time for 1 year. And then we bought my folks had an apartment, so we lived there for a couple of years. We had our first 2 kids there, 2 sons. And then we bought a 10-acre chunk of land in Vermilion, and I built a house on there. And we literally built it. I mean, I had a cousin who had been in the Navy also, good friends. So we built his house first. And my friends all told me that I was crazy because we'll get his house built and you'll never see him again. Well, it turned out to be, he put more time on my house. The two of us built his house, and the 2 of us built my house. Literally, 2x4 by 2x4. Took us a year and a half to build his, and a year and a half to build mine. So,
what about your friend who enlisted at the same time as you?
The one who was drafted came back, and he became a doctor in our town. And so he went to school, became a doctor, and he became our family physician.
Wow. So then you still remain connected with him and
yes,
able to share stories with each other?
But he died rather young.
Okay.
And I was with him, actually, not with him when he died, but I was with him in the hospital the day he died. I visited him that day. My other good friend, the one who I actually enlisted with, he moved to Southern Ohio, and we only saw each other on very rare occasions, only a couple times. He bought a farm and raised cattle down there. We had this little 10-acre farm, and we were pretty self-sufficient. At first, built a barn. We had a big garden. We ended up having 7 kids. We had 3 boys, and then we had 3 girls, then we had another boy. And first, we had for milk, I had a couple of goats. Then I had 3 goats if we had more kids, but it took too long in the morning, and I was teaching school, so it took too long in the morning to milk 3 goats. So we got rid of the goats, and I got a cow. But we had our own chickens and big garden stuff. We were pretty self-sufficient. My wife didn't teach anymore. She stayed at home, and she canned our food. We cut our own hay. Raised beef and chickens and a few sheep, stuff like that, from time to time. So we had At first, we did our own, killed our own steers. For the first two, I did that. But luckily, I had an uncle who was a butcher, so he came out and showed us how to cut them up. And then we'd take them to the freezer. But after that, I would take the beefs they'd come and get them to a slaughterhouse, and they would do that for us and package it. And we just had to pick up the packages and take them to the freezer and bring them home to our own freezer. So that was a little easier than doing your own. After that, our kids were industrious and saved their money, and they all went to college and graduated from college. The oldest one became a doctor. The second oldest one was a computer geek. He's worked for a bank. The third one stayed in the reserves and became an architect, and he was stationed at Dayton, Ohio, at the Air Force Base there, and he was the architect that was and became in charge of the building that went on at the Dayton Air Force Base, like the hangars and.
So he was an airman.
He was not an airman. He was he was an architectural engineer, and he was an officer, but he did the base planning. Okay,
so he was commissioned in the Air Force.
He was in the Air Force. Yeah.
Wow. So that's it's still good to see. You know, somebody else in your family also went military route.
Yeah. Well, actually, my oldest son too was in the military for a couple of years too as a physician.
Okay.
But then he come on and got into private practice. He was a surgeon that did orthopedic surgeon. So he did knees and shoulders and stuff like that.
What branch was he in?
He was in the Air Force.
Okay.
Oldest daughter married an Air Force, and he was also. They stayed in the Air Force, and he did. Well, he was like how do I say it? He was in charge of assigning pilots and personnel to their different jobs.
Okay.
And they spent quite a bit of time in Germany during the Cold War.
Yeah.
And a couple of her kids they spent time in England too. So a couple of her kids were born in Germany or in England when they were overseas.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think now. The other Kathy, the second daughter. And they were both the older daughters they went to college, and they were both active in athletics and track, and they were both were on track scholarships. One went to Kent, and one went to Bowling Green. My youngest daughter then moved to California. Married and moved to California. She always wanted to be in the movies, but she never quite made it. A couple of bit parts, but that's as far as she got. And then the youngest son, Sean, went in the Air Force, became a pilot. He flew tankers. He stayed in the Air Force for 30 years.
Wow. So family's long history of military service.
And he was stationed in Nebraska, Air Force in Nebraska. He flew tankers all over the place. And he's retired now also. So that's about the history of my kids too, I guess. We sold the farmhouse. The kids bought the farm, but they sold the farmhouse. I built another house in downtown Vermilion. My good friend, good lifelong friend from Kent, I helped him build his house. He helped me build the second house, and so we built the house in Vermilion. One of the things we did, though, we tore down a barn and had a slate roof on it. So I built the second house from the leavings from the barn, and I put the slate roof on the house in Vermilion. So it's one of the 3 houses in Vermilion that has a slate roof on it. So that's about it, I guess. I think I run out of stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably the most dangerous part was the minesweeping part of it. The minesweeping part after the war was over. Although we were, when I was on the troop ship, we always had an escort. So that probably we did go into some dangerous water, but I don't know. I guess I got through it with a clean record, except for the one incident. But I had a good captain, and he kept that out of my record, really.
Yeah. No, I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want, or any messages that you would like to relay to future generations who may stumble upon this video, or people who might decide to go into the military? Is there any messages you want to leave those people who are younger and who will be, taking our shoes one day? Whether it's enlisted, commissioned, or anything like that. Is there anything you want to let those people know from your experience?
Probably, I guess, watch your consumption of alcohol. I saw some guys get into big trouble that way.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some careers get ruined from alcohol-related incidents, and it's terrible. They could be the greatest sailor, officer you ever met, and then that one thing happens. And what about perhaps for the general population? Is there anything you want them to know about veterans or military members in general? Some people, for you and I to have a conversation, it's a little bit easier because we both served, you're both in the same branch, and we can relate and share stories, and we have that commonality that we both served. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you want to let the civilian population, the general population, know about veterans or military members?
Well, I think it's, besides, to me, it was very beneficial. I don't know if I had gone to college if I hadn't been in the service with the GI Bill. It made a really significant difference from my family, because once we got to college, I mean, you got to continue your education. Yeah. I think I'm getting to the point now where I'm getting hard to remember, what I have, how much I've told you. I'm sure I left some things out, especially all the. I mean, I've been to. I was to so many different places because we were on the move constantly. We had like a 3-day or 4-day layer for repairs. Otherwise, when I was on board ship, we moved from island to island to island. I could show you on here. I don't know if it would make any difference. Like from New Zealand, right? All these islands up through here to New Guinea, up here to the Marshall Islands, over here where is it, to Bora Bora. I mean, that is a big chunk of the Pacific Ocean, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were constantly on the move from island to island to island, yeah. I could add one more incident. I know. Did I tell you about the fellow that fell into the water?
No.
Coming off. Okay,
Man,
when we were unloading the troops, well, I done, like I said, a little bit of boxing in this little a kid from Mexico. He was, anyway. He was smaller than me, but he was a better boxer than I was, so he beat me. But anyway, and he and I were shipmates on the same boat. He was the bowman and I was the engineer on the same boat. Let's turn this off. Anyhow, when we were unloading the troops at the first place in Bougainville, the guys were climbing down the nets, and they're supposed to, when they climb the nets, they're supposed to grab the vertical nets with their hands. Well, this one guy put his hands on this way, and the guy coming down above him stepped on his hands. Okay, and he fell off the net between the landing boat and the ship, and he had his gear on, right? So the little my bowman, the little guy who was a better boxer than me, he went into the water and pulled this guy out from between the boat and the ship and hung on to him until we could get down there and pull him out of the water.
Yeah.
So we actually saved this guy's life.
It's remarkable.
So I think I missed that. I think that was pretty good. And I don't know who the guy was. We don't know who the guy was. We probably never ever saw him again, you know. He was one of the troops coming off the ship.
Yeah.
So,
but you never know whose life you changed.
Yeah, I never,
like,
you know,
just by doing that.
Yeah.
And that guy, who knows, he could have went on and had a family. And
that's right. That's right.
We don't know what his success was, or you know, what his future generations.
But it was, you know, I'm sorry I forgot that, because it was a memorable thing to me that we and I helped pull him out of the water too, you know. So, yeah. But the little fella, he dove in there, and I don't know how. Man, he had a lot of guts to do that. This is one. Here's one more. Okay. This is a poem that one of my shipmates wrote. I don't know. Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
This is the first ship I was on. Okay. My daughter sent this. I could read it. I found my dad this Veterans Day among his attic treasures, reading letters from his youthful years in the Navy, reminiscing about his time in the service of our country and our freedom 77 years ago, World War II. Among his treasures kept, written by his friend and shipmate, To Thee Though Immortal, by Chuck Gilrich. I couldn't remember his name. Okay. He's the guy that pulled that guy out of the water.
Oh.
Chuck Gilrich, okay. He's from Montana. It's about the Battle of Bougainville, Solomon Island, South Pacific. If I can read it. To thee, though, O immortal, on that one cold, gray, and hazy morning, as the wind turned toward the sea, our ships put out with course unknown to fight for our liberty. The sea was rough, the men were calm, as the waves dashed over the side. They were men of men, and ever alert to man the guns in their stride. Then off to the starboard ship took shape, like the moon takes shape in the sky. Once they knew that their time was near at hand, that they were to do or die. Sturdy figures, these lads of steel. And there's a missing line there, I don't know what it is. Some just stood like in a daze. Some began to dream. Then, like a roar from the horn's mouth, the ships began to shell. Their deadly fire into the enemy's steel, it was like a blazing hell. One by one, they silenced the guns of the aggressor's batteries complete, while our own ships smoked from stem to stern from shells of the enemy's fleet. The sky burned bright all through the night, as well did the sea. Our guns never once ceased firing, for it was they or we. Then finally, when the firing stopped, some had fled, some were sunk. The command was given, fall in, or what was left did.
It's a pretty powerful poem.
He was a farm boy from Montana. Yeah. I guess that's all.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, because I don't know. We saw each other once after the war. That's all. I went to Alaska. I was when I was in my junior year at college. My roommate and I, they were allowed. You could get, I think, 125 acres in Alaska if you homesteaded on the land for 5 years. You could get it for free. Mm-hmm. So anyway, when I went to Kent, I went right through summers too, but I took part of the one summer off, and the two of us, and actually 4 of us, drove up. They opened up the Alaskan Highway, so you could drive up there through Canada to Alaska, and they said you could homestead this land up there. So anyway, 4 of us we drove up the Alaskan Highway to Anchorage, Alaska, and then out on get this right, the Kenai Peninsula, which is to the west of Anchorage. The Matanuska Valley is a good farmland east of Anchorage, where the good farms were. But we went out there and looked at that land and decided it was a little bit not so good. So we didn't do the homestead thing. We just came on back then. But yeah. That was another trip that we took, and we decided not to homestead in Alaska. So yeah, and we homesteaded in Vermilion, Ohio instead. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much.
I should quit. Yeah.
Thank you for taking time to speak with me. It's stories like yours that are important for our future to know and for our history. And as another Navy veteran, I always love hearing stories about other experiences, especially from the World War. So I've only read about it, and I learned naval history when I was in, but it's always better to hear the firsthand accounts of what you actually went through. And thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay.